A vintage watch. For some, it is a huge servicing bill and search for unavailable parts just waiting to happen. For others, it is history and mechanical prowess to wear, or a source for the truly unique. You know which side I'm on. And so is this 70s Zodiac Astrographic, which aims for the stars as its red seconds dot seamlessly floats above the silvery dial. Okay, I'll stop. Let's just check it out. Zodiac is a surprisingly old watch brand. The founder, Arist Kalam, whose father was also a watchmaker, worked under his own name starting in 1882 in Le Locle, Switzerland, and it was renamed to Zodiac around the beginning of the 20th century under leadership of Arist's son and young watchmaker Louis Arist. Their lineup consisted of pocket watches, and they also made the jump to producing their own movements then. With the participation of his son René Kalam, the brand started focusing on wristwatches around 1924, and their first automatic watch in 1930, as well as their own shock absorption system, followed up by an 8-day power reserve watch in 1937, also a novelty. Most publications focus on the next step in 1949, the autographic. It was one of the first two watch models to ever feature a power reserve gauge. First one being the JLC Powermatic caliber 481 from 1948. In 1953, the Sea Wolf saw the light of day as a true and commercially available dive watch. Same time frame as the Submariner, although I might argue this is wide open for discussion. In the 60s, the standout model for me was the Zodiac Aerospace GMT, also a model that resurfaced in the modern Zodiac's lineup in 2019 as a reissue, but more on that later. In the early 70s, we arrived back at the Sea Wolf again, now the Super Sea Wolf, a watch model which probably deserves its own video, given the fact that I've come across this case and bezel design so many times on my vintage journey under different brand names, and it always intrigued me. Before we arrive at this model, we jump ahead a few decades to finish Zodiac's history. The 80s and 90s were a bit troublesome for Zodiac, brought back in the 90s by a former Tag Heuer CEO, which was visible in its design language, but not all of them bad in my opinion. But anyways, this era went sideways in 1998, just to be continued by another incorporated for the Super Sea Wolf and the marine life. Ah yes, 90s designs, love it or hate it. The modern version of Zodiac is now part of the Fossil group since 2001. And think what you will about Fossil. I think they are doing a great job on reviving some of their classic models with a very modern take and a funky color palette. But I have yet to handle one of these myself. Now, let's finish the history lesson with a quick detour. The Zodiac Killer. Probably not something obviously mentioned anywhere near the brand side for good reason, yet undoubtedly linked with the name, since the 60s serial killer used the Zodiac brand logo on his letters, and the prime suspect supposedly owned a Sea Wolf, which led the film crew to include one as well. Let's get a bit less movie star, more astrographic. This watch was available in the 70s in different versions, countless ones if you dig deep enough. And the one I'm holding right here is probably one of the rarer ones, dubbed the widescreen or jumbo, hinting at the broader TV shape than the more common TV case or round model. The Astrographic had a reboot in the Fossil era as well in 2014 with a TV case and prominent decorative screws on the front to identify it. And in 2019 also with the 50th anniversary reissue of the round model, both with Fossil's STP movements. But I think you're here for the, in my opinion, more interesting 70s version, especially when we get to the movement. First and obvious things first, case and bracelet. Despite its clunky look, the case is quite comfortable to wear and the lug-to-lug not too large on my 17cm wrist. The normal TV version is brushed all around, but the widescreen has an additional bevel here, which sports a mirror finish. It is not as thick as I'd imagined from first glance, with its 13.5mm, including a flat crystal on top, which protrudes roughly 1mm and bears the Zodiac logo printed on its underside. A fact that makes it nearly impossible to properly replace it now, so make sure it is intact. Not sure about the water resistance rating, but I think even in its heyday it was not more than 30 meters. The original bracelet is a vintage treat as well, but with a rather unusual lug width for all you strap change enthusiasts out there, a lot of odd dimensions. It has a type of clasp that immediately made me shudder at the thought of seeing the whole watch crash on the floor while trying to put it on. But once on the wrist, it feels surprisingly secure and looks great too. The so-called mystery dial is where the true fun begins. Or, if you feel rather unmysterious, it's composed of 3 transparent polyacrylate discs, which carry the seemingly floating, borderless minutes and hour hands, as well as the red seconds dot above the silvery sunburst dial. The round minute track is also just printed on the underside of the rectangular crystal. Thus, you can have a nice peek at the discs from the side, enhancing the floating, futuristic impression in my opinion. All in all, a hallmark to represent the more adventurous time of watch design in the 70s. Some brands accomplish the mystery component a bit simpler, for example by obscuring part of the dial, but most are based on the same principle as the Astrographic, with transparent discs like the LeCoultre Galaxy Mystery. Some were powered from the center like normal hands and like this one, while others had toothed disc edges and were connected to the movement via the outer rim. As you can imagine, this whole design bears some risks. Dust in between the discs and scratches can turn the discs opaque bit by bit and ruin the whole free-floating appearance. Therefore, condition is key for this model, even more so than for others. And servicing it properly is no simple task. Speaking about complication, let's have a look at the impressive movement. This automatic movement represents a cooperation of such illustrious brands such as Girard-Perregaux, Doxa, Eberhard & Co. and Favre-Leuber, and ticks at 36,000 beats per hour or 10 ticks per second. A frequency which one might possibly associate only with more current high-end luxury brands. Hence the addition of SST or split-second timing to this and several other model names in their lineup. Quite the powerhouse, hidden away as a second layer of mystery beneath the dial, providing the red dot with its smooth, sweeping motion. Girard-Perregaux was also the first to accomplish this high beat rate on the basis of an Schild movement in 1966, even beating Seiko in that regard. And the movement here is an automatic successor to it. As a side note, there was also a low beat version of this watch, called the Orbiter, but these have somehow become even rarer today. The Astrographic in its 70s glory became rare in the last years, especially in good condition. Thus, the more well-preserved specimen of this model, may it be the round TV screen or even widescreen version, venture further towards and sometimes even above the €2,000 mark, which, all things considered, is a very cheap way to dip your toes into a truly high-beat movement vintage watch. With these design outliers, you can definitely find them below the €1,000 mark, and it may be tempting to go for a cheap one on eBay or somewhere else, but unless the pictures are very good and you have a high level of trust, I'd stick to models from established vintage dealers, since as I mentioned in the beginning, this could be the huge servicing bill and search for unavailable parts waiting to happen. But please do not let this deter you from vintage glory in general. If the mystery part is not your style, you can also find this package with a classical 3-hand design and the stunning widescreen case at an even lower price. Or jump even further down the rabbit hole of 70s funk and go for an Astrodigit SST. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this stroll into vintage mystery dials. Thanks to each and everyone who ventures with me into the weird and wonderful of the vintage watch world. See you in the next one on the Time Worn channel.